So we come to a concept of rotational imbalances, which we always address third. We're thinking first decompression, lengthening the spine, expanding the rib cage, and then we're thinking how do we hinge those hips while maintaining step one, that decompression stance. And then we're able to think about rotational imbalances. So we approach this with it almost like an anti-rotation way. So the hips here in these archer and reverse archer positions are what we're trying to address. We're thinking about that hip is actually doing the work even though it's not moving. So that's the goal, is that in that first position it was that left hip that was keeping that internal rotation position while the rest of the body externally rotated over top of it. All right, and we'll get in all of these positions, but let's just look at that all again, and we'll run through all the steps. But a lot of these things we've already approached building up to be able to correct these rotational patterns. And the archer is just an example. We'll look at this in a kneeling pattern and laying and prone, and how can we address rotational imbalances after we've kind of gotten a good handle for steps 1 and 2, decompression and hinging. So here with the right foot forward, it depends on your pattern. Everyone has a different pattern. We can think about, once we solve kind of what the hips are doing, we can just assume there's a cascade of imbalances following that. So the front hip, as we rotate, it's trying to maintain that external rotation. The rest of the body is turning away from it, so it's fighting. It's another anti-rotation exercise. So you can even think about the left hip doing things as well, because most of us have one hip going one way and the other hip is patterned in the other direction. So it would be a cascade of muscular imbalances based on what that joint is doing, and a cascade of joint imbalances based on what's happening there. So here's the archer. It's your classic archer. There's no hinge really. We're staying in that decompressed stance like you're drawing a bow. So as I pull along the right side of my body, that left hip is actually fighting to remain externally rotated. So if you have an internally rotated hip on the left, that's what you want to do. If you're a left pattern like I am, this is actually not the exercise I should be doing. It's okay that I'm doing it as long as I'm really in that decompression stance and good hinging. Even though I'm not really deep into a hinge, there's always a subtle hinge involved. So that way it's not going to severely hurt me. But if I really want to focus on correction, then I'd actually want to go for this pattern. So just another quick example. So let's say we're just doing a normal archer, right foot's forward. We are trying to address a internal rotational imbalance of the hip. So as the body turns left, we are fighting to keep that right hip externally rotated. It's not internally rotating following the rest of the body. So it's actually correcting an internal rotation dysfunction.